what is it?
Posse.
The posse. Because they would come, into the living room and you would see them engage in these deep debates. And it didn't dawn on me until that classroom that, all of that was part of the thinking that needed to be done in order for this work to appear, in order for us to have something to talk about in a theory class that is as relevant as any other, old stuffy textbook. It's true, and it's an amazing experience to see those conversations be manifest in a physical piece of art, right? To show up into a classroom and see it manifested in my wheelhouse of, a syllabus and a classroom setting. So I'm deeply appreciative of that. And one thing that I hope to see more and explore more, as that was not my last invitation into a classroom, to talk about Uncle Hugh and Grandpa, that more have happened since, that we do get to a place to center his poetry and his writing, because he was an epic poet, storyteller, calypso singer. I mean, the genre's an avid opera fan. Like, it's incredible to think about the way that music could have been a boundary, a stopping point to say, okay, that's just for fun, right? That has no impact. But instead, he really adopted musical genres and poetry and writing as an extension, a space that he engaged and then wove into his art practice. And I think there's still more room in terms of poetry for me to really learn and understand him and his work there. But in terms of storytelling and folklore in particular, I will say that stands out in my memory even more so. I remember when I first realized that the stories I've heard about Baku, and these, Anansi and all of these figures, when I really started to notice how they were showing up in the work, how this statue, or piece of ceramic that was by the doorway, that it becomes invisible to your mind, and then you stop and you're like, oh my gosh, this is what Grandpa's mind saw when he was telling me this children's story, this folktale, and you realize how deep it is. But you're getting it orally, you're getting it through this master storyteller. And I hope that one day we get to an occasion to put that center stage. It's been deeply meaningful as a lens to the work that we don't talk about enough. And I'd love to hear actually Grandma talk a little bit about, yes,
about
please.
What? The poetry?
Yes.
Yeah, it's fascinating, because when Donald passed, we had just published Out of Anarchy, which was a little survey of mixed media ceramics from the 70s through to, he went back to doing ceramics in the late 2005, 2006, that area. But literally, he was not interested in that anymore. He immediately was starting a new book he called Edge of Spirit, which was to be a collection of his poetry and his drawings, or works on paper. So he was literally putting that together, and I think it's a while now, so he had actually selected the poetry, he had selected the images, and then he was deciding which image was going to go with which poem. And then he said, to hell with that, that's some editor's job. I left it alone, right? So it turns out, and Corinne's husband, Nigel, who is an editor and a writer and a playwright in his own right, I found one draft of the entire book of the poetry, and I said, Nigel, I need some help with this, because right after that I found a second draft. And it was like, ooh, he keeps changing the poems, right? So he and I went through, I passed it on to Nigel, said, could you look through this and find which you think is the authentic voice? Because someone's got to make a decision. Then I found a third draft. And by the time I arrived at the fourth draft, I put the entire project aside. And here we are 14 years later, it has all come back up.